Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today at the 30th edition of the CVC Insider Series. This week, we have a great session ahead, together with Stephane Longuet, Managing Director from Convivialité Ventures. Stephane has a very unique story as to how he came into the world of corporate venturing, and he will be sharing it today. But before we get started, I wanted to quickly set the stage so you'll have some context. First of all, my name is Alba, part of 500 Global, previously known as 500 Startups. 500 Global is one of the world's most active seed stage investors with over 2,500 direct investments into startups from 75 countries. And within 500, I work very closely with corporate investors and innovators to power their own projects, partnerships, and investments into startups. And we started the CVC Insider Series more than a year ago as part of our efforts to help raise the bar in corporate venturing and build a more stronger and more supportive ecosystem for startups and investors alike. And every 2 weeks, we host this roundtable featuring some of the world's top corporate venturing practitioners and sharing their unique story into CVC, challenges that they faced along the way, and some of the best practices that they've helped develop. And our host, Nicolas Sauvage, will be moderating our discussion, but there's also a Q&A function, so feel free to ask any questions that may come up, and we'll do our best to cover them. So now that you know what's going on, I'm going to hand it over to our host, Nicolas, to take it away. Please enjoy.
Thank you, Alba. And this is really a special timing with the new rebranding to 500 Global with local expertise. So this is really cool. Thank you for 500 Global to host these events, which is really to help people who are thinking about starting a corporate venture or already but want to learn from best practices from practitioners. Today, very, very lucky, you're going to have someone who was helping me learn about the best practices about corporate venturing. So Stephane, if you don't mind introducing yourself and maybe giving 5 to 10 minutes of your personal journey into corporate venturing.
Yes, sure. Good morning, Nicolas. Good morning or good evening, everyone. Many thanks for hosting me today. It's a pleasure to continue the discussion with you, Nicolas, a bit more publicly about corporate venture capital. You and I, we have shared a lot over the past year and about our ideas. So it's with pleasure that I continue to have this conversation with you today and share it with people who are interested.
Merci.
You're welcome. So I came to corporate venture capital by coincidence. It was not planned at all, and because I don't have any background in private equity, investment banking, or venture capital. I have some finance background, but I didn't intend to work for a CVC or to create a CVC from scratch. I'm a corporate animal, and I've been working for the same corporation for more than 20 years now. And you can see a few of our products in the background. So it's called Pernod Ricard. So it's the second biggest wine and spirits company in the world. And we have, all the brands you need to organize a big party, from the whiskey with Jameson, the Glenlivet, Chivas, Absolut Vodka, Beefeater Gin, Champagne, Mum, and Perrier-Jouet. So all the brands and you need to organize a great party and cocktails. And so after the business school, I worked for 3 years for Deloitte in the audit as an accountant. And then I joined Pernod Ricard because I thought the business was really exciting. And there were some possibility to grow in the corporation, starting from finance role, moving to CFO and running business unit. And this is what they were proposing, and also internationally. And I wanted to move internationally. I grew up in Paris. I love Paris and France, but I wanted to discover the world. And this is what Pernod Ricard was offering. So, after I joined 2 years after, I moved to Germany as a CFO, and it was a great experience for 3 years. Then I moved to Italy in Milan, also CFO for the market. And then when the group acquired Absolut for 6 billion, they sent me as the first, expat there to, facilitate the integration of the Absolut company within Pernod Ricard. I did that for 2 years, and after, they offered me to run a business unit, what we call a brand company, so in charge of a portfolio of brands, global brands, so vodka brands. And it was very entrepreneurial because these were all the other vodka brands than Absolut. So we had Polish vodka like Biborova and many new brands that we created from scratch. So a lot of innovation. And we had to think differently. It was like launching new startups in a corporate. So, and we had to learn how to do this with very little amount of money to do that. So being disruptive and trying to find new way of doing things. And I think this experience has helped me a lot actually to land into my new role, because after this experience, the group decided to create a corporate venture capital. And this is by meeting our CEO one day in Paris. He told me, I would like to meet with you to tell you about your next role. And in the morning, when I arrived in Paris, I thought, okay, he's going to offer me to run a country. And when I met with him, he said, no, listen, here's my vision. And I want to create Reconnecting venture to invest in new type of business beyond alcohol, in our space, which we call conviviality, meaning bringing people together. And it was with the logic of exploration of new business model, especially in services and experiences. So hospitality, retail, entertainment. And so that was part of a broader vision. And they had already thought about it and they decided to create it in San Francisco. I can come back to the reason why. And he said, okay, we want to do this. It's going to be based in San Francisco. We thought about you. What do you think? And it took me probably 30 seconds to say yes, even if it was not planned at all, because I thought it was spot on with my experience and skill set and what I like. And they identified that I was very entrepreneurial and eager to do things differently and risk adverse and always looking for new adventure. And this is why they offered me this role, together with the fact that I had some finance background, which they thought was important. So, and this is how it started. So it's different from your story, Nicolas, but and then I arrived in San Francisco and knew nothing about venture capital. I'd never been in San Francisco before neither. I'd been in the US many times, but in that city. So I had to learn everything from scratch, met great people who too. And this is how we developed Reconnecting Venture. So it was 4 years ago. And over the last 4 years, we made 25 investments in the US, in Europe, and in China. So we have a team on the ground in the US, in China, and in Europe. I can come back to that too. And this is where we are now.
Very cool. And I think one of the person you hinted we know well who has been helping us is Paul Holland. And it's quite spooky, but tonight we have a party with him. So very nice. So let me ask about the finance background. So it's part of your education, that's part of your experience. And your CEO believes that would be an important part of the discipline you need to bring into the role. How important is it?
So, when he told me this, I said, but I don't think it's so important, the finance background, to be honest. And I still don't think it's very important. I mean, you can do a great job as investor without a finance background. You need to be comfortable with figures for sure, and business model and do basic math. But what was helpful, it is helpful too if you have some, and also with my audit background, when you go into the details of the deal, into the details of the term sheets, in terms of managing the risk and so on, that can help. But I don't think it's a must. I think it's useful if you have it, but it's not the primary quality, I think, which is required to be a great investor.
Okay. I like to think about investments we make as all the things that can go wrong. And if everything goes right, how big it gets. And do you feel like a finance background gives you a bias towards one versus the other? Or how do you feel about your bias that came into the role?
Well, when I say to people I have a finance background, they don't believe me. Okay. They say, but you were not a finance guy. I say, why? Because finance guy, they think about the risk and so on. And say, not necessarily. When I was a CFO, I was always working, with the sales team, the marketing team, to figure ways how can we grow the business and faster. So finance is not only managing the risk, and as you say, it's about how big it can be. So for me, it has not been my finance background has not been a problem at all. We have not missed opportunity because of this. To answer your question, but the finance background helps to think about what can go wrong, even if you don't want to think about it when you invest, and protect yourself a bit more. So this is how it can be helpful.
Okay, very nice. And then you use a term called, you said you're a corporate animal for more than 20 years. But what came clear when you described your career is that you've been an intrapreneur. So inside the company, creating new business, creating new brand and growing them. Can you describe how much of that intrapreneur experience is relevant, maybe for empathy, but also for helping the entrepreneurs you decide to invest in?
Actually, it's a great question, because I think that's the most important piece. And I think this is a real reason why they asked me to do that job, and not because I had some finance background. Because I've been through this journey that entrepreneurs have when you start a business from scratch. It's of course different because it's a corporate world. So you have one investor funding you, and it's done in a different context because it's corporate. So you can't do whatever you want. But you go through the same story. You need to figure out, okay, what is the pain point you need to solve? What's the product? How do I make that people will love or will need to buy my product versus a nice to have, and so on. And at that time, I didn't know all this, by the way. So I thought, if we create a great product from our point of view, of course, consumer will buy it. But no. So you learn when you work with startups, you learn to think differently. And actually, we failed a lot, and this is why it has helped me. All this failure. I mean, we launched a lot of new products. There is only one that is still alive today. So it shows how hard it is to innovate and create a business from scratch. And this is what I've learned. So this is why, to answer your question, of course, I do have a lot of empathy for the founder, because I can imagine how hard it is. And it's even harder for them because they need to raise money from, different investors all the time, which is different when you are in a corporate world because you have one person to talk to, basically.
And how much of your experience of building a brand and a startup building a product, which of course there's a branding element to it, how much of that relates and what is the difference? And I'm more interested by the differences.
Yeah, I think the startup, actually, when they launch their new venture, they don't necessarily think about branding, actually. They think much more about, okay, pain points, problem to be solved, and the product. Okay, they think more about the product. Okay, I'm going to create this amazing product because I know it's going to solve this pain point. When we create new brand, we think brand immediately because it's going to be consumer facing, and it's really about the image. How do you package your bottle, basically, so that it catches the attention of the customer, how you are going to market it and promote it and activate it. So all this thinking that we have when we create a spirits brand, most of the startups, they start to have it almost in a growth phase. Many of our startups, they start to think about branding and marketing when they want to grow faster. At the beginning, it's really about making sure you have the product market fits, and the branding or the marketing is not important. It's not the most important piece. And I think this is the main difference. And this is why we can help startups. And this is why startups are interested to have us as investor, and because they see us, or Pernod Ricard, as an expert for branding. And at one stage, they know they will need some expertise to help them to build their brand.
Okay. And you talked about your mission is exploration into new services and new experiences, which is not what Pernod Ricard is experience in branding necessarily. So how does this reconnect between the expertise that Pernod Ricard can bring and what the startups will need, especially when it's experiences in things that are not yet existing? It's totally new, a bet into the future.
Well, there are different things that the startup are looking for from us as investor. And actually for us, so we are a CVC. We position ourselves as a strategic CVC. So, not only here to do financial return, but also to be helpful strategically for the startup. So it's something we always discuss with all the startups during the diligence phase, okay? Beyond the fact that we're interested in investing in their business and this space, what can we do together? What can we bring to you? What do you expect from us? Even if we have already thought about it, but we want to hear that from them. And align so that it makes sense both for the startup and for us that they take our money. So, and there are different things that they're looking for. So first, they are looking for brand recognition. They want to be able to talk that big corporates believe in their business model. Well, that's one. Then they want access to Pernod Ricard, which is the most important, and mostly to help them to accelerate their growth. Either because we will be able to, drive some traffic to them, with all the marketing activity or the access to consumer that we have, and accelerate the recruitment of new customers, or because we can help them to develop new business or new verticals for them. So basically, if a startup has an experienced business, at one stage, very logically, I would say, yeah, but in that type of experience, people have food and drinks, and I would like to add on all this stuff to the service. And with you, Pernod Ricard, we can build amazing program with bars or drinks and food. So we can help them to develop the content of it, and then they will work on the product development. So we can co-develop, this additional service part of their product, so that it makes a better product for the customers, and for us, it can be a new route to market, to consumer, a new opportunity to develop our product in the moment of consumption. And in general, they are also very eager to access to some expertise. So I mentioned the branding, but especially when they want to grow internationally, because we are present in more than 80 countries in the world, we can offer conversation, introduction in the country where they would like to expand. And so there is a long list of things we can offer, and we always discuss this with the startup before.
So I think there is something I want to highlight to the audience. You're probably one of the first to be very clear. We are a strategic corporate VC. And then you spend your time detailing all the value add to the startup. Most people, when they think about strategic VC, they think about all the strategies they will bring back to the mothership. You haven't even talked about it. You just talked about all the value from the mothership to your startups. Yeah. So I want to double click on that. How did you design Convivialité Ventures at the beginning to make sure that you deliver this value add? And how do you keep the momentum for the last 3 years to keep adding value and to bring this value in a measurable way?
Yeah, so from day one, we designed it this way with this intention to provide this expertise. But that was on paper, okay?
Exactly.
And after, you need to deliver. And actually, it touched the biggest challenge we all have, and which is how do you create that connection after, the investment? How do you make sure this strategic relationship, this partnership, this connection will happen between the startup and your colleagues, your mothership, and the different business units? And this is the hardest piece. So from day one, we didn't want to clearly identify champions where we say, okay, you are the champion for this topic. We will go to you whenever we need something. We much more went, case by case. Okay, we are thinking, okay, this startup, they need this. So we decided to reach out to some people say, okay, we have this startup. What do you think? Is it interesting for you? It more organically.
Yep.
Okay. And most of the people have a great interest when you reach out to them. Oh, I'm looking at this startup. They're doing this. Usually, they are very interested. Okay, oh, that's cool. I like it. Oh yeah, we can do this. Okay, great. Then you invest, and you call back this person and say, hey, we're investing now. Are you ready to work with that? Well, I have other project. It's complicated.
That's why I was asking about keeping the momentum.
No, but you know what it is. So, and then we started to realize, wow, there is a very cool factor in what we are doing. But if, it doesn't fit the strategic objective of a team or, another company of the group, they are not going to spend time working with an early stage startup to try to figure out how to build something together. They will say, we do that in 2 or 3 years, but now we focus on something else. So that's just the biggest challenge of a corporate venture, is how do you practically manage to create that magic moment where a startup and a corporate are going to work together and build something amazing. And this is what we learn over time. Okay. So after a certain time, we took the learning of this. And when we open new country, like in China or like in Europe, we said, okay, we are going to make sure we get the sponsorship of the local CEO, the local team, that they see the value of what we are doing. And we will have clear point of contact that we can go to and work with, when we do diligence to evaluate what we can do together and to make sure that after it will happen. So that we have learned and that we are now implementing everywhere. But when we started at the beginning, it was not so clear for us that the best way to do it was to identify this local partner, sponsor we can go to. And that was really part of their objective or intention to work with startup because they see the benefit for it.
Very nice. And talking of sponsors, does it mean that before you make an investment, you've set a design where you need sponsors to invest, or it's more of a connection with the sponsors, but it's not blocking you from making an investment?
Yeah, it's not blocking us from making an investment. We are always involving people from the business when we are interested in a startup, just to get their point of view and also on what we could do. And ideally, we have a sponsor. That's the best case.
And it's a best practice too.
Pardon?
It's also a best practice to get people involved, wanting it.
Yes. So we always involve people. And after, we don't want to put too much pressure on them neither, and say, okay, we want you to sign off that you are going to do something. We take our own risk that potentially after, the strategic relationship will not happen immediately, or it will take some time, or won't happen at all. Okay. But we always have a thesis because it helps us also when we talk internally to identify what can we do together. And it's part of our pitch to the startup after. Hey, we talk to some colleagues. This is very interesting because we can do this and that. And but we don't need a sign off. And when we present this to our investment committee, I
think you're doing a bit like us, which is you act like if you need the sponsorship, but you don't need the sponsorship.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so there's one thing you said, which I liked. You said, we already have ideas about how we want to add value to a given startup, but we want to hear from them. Can you, and I think there's a golden nugget here. So can you say why you want to hear from them the value versus you go into like a sales pitch, or this is all the things we can do for you?
I just think it's the right way to do it. I think it's important to understand their problem and what is the value we can add. So I think you have a sales background, Nicolas. So I guess this is how you were selling, your product or services. You listen first, and after you figure out how to adapt, your offer to what they want. Yeah. But it's a dialogue, and it's if you want to have a win-win partnership, you need to understand what's the most important for them and figure out if you can help them with this. And then sometimes, they have not thought about what we can bring. And we say, on top of that, we can do this. And sometimes say, wow, that would be great. So.
Do you have an example of something you didn't think would be very valuable, and during the discussion with the startup, you identified a golden nugget, something that really helps them to be more successful?
I think some startups didn't realize the value of our distribution network, and how our distribution network could help them to expand faster, internationally. Okay, so the best case is if our sales force is empowered to promote a service or a product, it's like free sales force for them. And so it's not something we can offer like that, because we need the sponsorship. If you need a local CEO of a country that say, yeah, I'm going to help you to roll out this solution or this product because it's amazing, and I'm going to ask my whole team to talk about it and promote it. So it's not something you can offer like this, but in some cases it has happened, and that's super powerful, and they were not expecting it at all.
Very nice. Now, you mentioned your CEO was very clear you should start in San Francisco. Why?
I think the first reason is because it's in the US, and the US is still, the biggest ecosystem in terms of innovation, in terms of, dollars invested in startups. And the US is our biggest market for Pernod Ricard, number one. So biggest investment market, biggest market for Pernod Ricard. So they thought it makes total sense to start from the US versus starting from Paris. Then why San Francisco in the US? Because this is, Silicon Valley is the biggest ecosystem still, also in terms of innovation. This is where historically the VC are based, the biggest startup, have emerged. And not only, of course, but then, people argue, yeah, but you are in a consumer business, lifestyle, so it's not, so much San Francisco, it would be more LA. I say, yeah, maybe. And actually, we do have more investment in LA than in San Francisco. But, you need to start from somewhere. And if we would redo it, I think I would do the same, because here you are in a, you have everything here. You have, the university, you have a lot of VC, you have, the whole ecosystem is geared towards innovation and launching startups. We could have done it from LA too. So I think I think the West Coast makes sense, but we could have done it from New York too, so that's, I think it's, I don't have, a clear cut on saying it has to be here. That this is how they thought.
It was not a bad choice. And then what I was very surprised is you expanded very quickly into China. Most CVCs would take 2-3 years before they even think about international expansion, maybe because of your experience of doing so, you went fearless. Can you tell us maybe one of the biggest learning you had to do that and the rationales behind?
So China is our second biggest market. And it's one of the markets that has driven the growth of Pernod Ricard for the last 15 years. So it's very strategic for us. That's the reason number one. Two, it's very dynamic, also startup ecosystem. Not easy to penetrate though. And three, it's the most important, reason is that our local affiliate, and particularly our local CEO there for Pernod Ricard, was really eager on, launching or having quality venture operating in China, because he could see the value of it. So when he talks about sponsorship, it's a sponsorship that came organically when he saw that, we created it in the US, and actually he was pushing to launch it faster than what I thought, even myself.
Okay, very nice.
So I worked with him to figure out how to do it and build a team there. And that has been critical for the success of our launch in China, to have such a level of sponsorship there.
And what did you do differently than you did in the US in terms of maybe the recruitment, the skill set you were looking for, the connection with the team in China?
So we have a Chinese team, of course, there, but very international. So it's not a big team, it's 2 people. And this is our model when we launch a new region, I would say, or big country. We have, 1 investment director, 1 analyst. That's how we operate. And both of them have an international background. They have studied abroad. They have masters, in INSEAD or in Spain. And so they have an international profile. Then that's for their background. And they had some investor background too, also, because it helps a lot, and even CVC background. That's the best case, because you know about the complexity of a CVC versus a VC. So they have investor background. And then what we did differently also when it comes back to sponsorship and key point of contact, we have within our local affiliate key partners we work with on a continuous basis when we scout startups and screen and evaluate what we can do together. Dedicated people from the core business working with us on building partnership with startups. And this is what we have done differently. And that works really well.
In the same building or?
Same building, yeah.
Okay, that's a big one.
That's a big one, yeah.
Okay, I think BMW I Ventures did that too, and that really helps to get the tissue going.
Yes. I mean, it helps. It doesn't need to be in the same building to work, and I can see that in Europe because it's not in the same building. It's much more fragmented. But for sure, it helps. It's in Shanghai.
Very good. So now you have 3 teams, well, 3 locations.
Yeah.
How do you keep the teamwork going with different time zones that are not friendly with each other?
Yeah.
How do you make sure that your team is thinking as one team, or actually do you prefer to have them thinking as each location is their own leadership?
It's a combination of both. They are all in charge of their, local investments. And we have not put in place an internal investment committee within the team to vote on where the US team has a right to say on China investment. But we definitely do share within the team what everybody is doing. So we have a global team call, which is a challenge with the time zone, but it's possible. So, I mean, we wake up early here and it's late at night in China, and middle of the day in France after the lunch, so it's not easy for them.
That's tough for the French.
And but it's very important for me to share, cross-fertilize, first to have a similar approach, how we operate as investor, and also share, the most interesting deal we are working on. And then we debate on, what do we see in that type of business globally? What do we see? The Chinese team bringing a topic, we discuss, okay, what do we see in the US? What do we see in Europe around that? So that everybody's bringing, some thinking to help to make the right decision. So that we definitely do. I think is very important. And it makes our CVC pretty unique and very powerful to make the right decision. And also to add value to the startups, because we have this global view on what's going on. So we can say, oh, we see that in China, there is this company doing exactly this, and it works really well for this reason, or it didn't work for this reason. So, and you see a lot of trends now coming from China into the US too. So it's not anymore, the only one way. So that there is a very strong value in having this global conversation and global view on the business.
Very nice. And I think part of being the eyes locally in different geographies is very high value add. How did you recruit these people who can actually spot these trends? Because that's not the easiest skill to recruit for.
You mean the skills for the investment team?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good question. You need to, I think the skills set that we are looking for is, as I mentioned before, ideally people who have done CVC. So they have both the ability to scout the good startup, and they are investor. This is their primary skill set, and this is what they like. But 2, they like to do it in a corporate world. So it's not only for financial return, it's also to create this strategic or partnership with a corporation, and they enjoy also the corporation. They need to enjoy working for a corporation with the good and bad, And but to come back to your question, they first need to be investor, and they need to like it. They need to be excited with, okay, it's like when you go hunting, and then, you say, wow, I'm onto something, it's really exciting. So I'm looking for people who are excited with being investor, that have that, in their gut somewhere.
I think there is a golden nugget here you just said, which is you need to find people who will enjoy the corporation. And if I look at all the CVCs that complain about the corporation, they're not the ones that do so well. So I think having that enjoyment, wanting to engage, and there will be times where it's difficult, but enjoy the corporation, I think is a really good tip, actually.
I have so many friends working in startup, being entrepreneur, that tell me I could never, work in a corporation. So much politics, that's they just can't. So, my advice to investor is, if you want to work in a VC or CVC, you need to think first, okay, what type of investor do I want to be? Mm-hmm. If you are primarily excited with finding the company who is going to change the world and the most exciting things with the biggest return ever, that's great. Of course, we all want that. But, if you do it in the corporate world, you need to consider, okay, what are we going to do with this company? Okay, so if it's going to Mars, okay, are we going to drink alcohol tomorrow in Mars? I'm not sure. So if you are looking for the most exciting stuff, you want to be very independent, and what matters for you is getting incentive and carry and so on, then the CVC is probably not the best spot. If you enjoy the corporation, meaning creating this connection between an exciting startup and a corporation so that the magic happen, then you are ready for the CVC. But this is hard, it's you need to identify the right people who will get excited with startups so that it makes sense for their job, and then working on creating this magic moment where there is something happening. And this is hard work. Yep. And in a CVC, it's half of the job, from my point of view, so that it's successful.
It's very hard to make the magic happen. I agree. Let's go back to the strategic CVC point. So you clearly spend a lot of time about all the value you can bring to the startups, but what is the value you bring back to the mothership? Can you describe a bit about how you define that value and how it's absorbed inside the company and how you spread it across the company?
So, yeah, because, this is very subjective too. And the strategic value, it can be tangible and it can be intangible too. So if I start with the intangible piece, this is the hardest. Okay. We see a lot of things. We see where the world is going. We see emerging trends before other in the organization. So how do we bring that back? How important is it, and for who? Because it depends who you are talking to. You have, the CEO of your company, the top management, the leadership team, the key managers. So, and this intangible value is different depending on the people. But this intangible value is critical. It's very difficult, and by definition is very difficult to measure. But this is something expected, and people want to hear. They want to know, and starting from the CEO to anybody.
Yep.
And it's very important to find ways to gather this learning, this information that we see every day, and give it back, with maybe different formats to all these people. And the more we talk, and the more we progress and bring that value, we realize it's important for them, and they want to hear. The number of people who want to talk to us and hear about what we see, because they are personally very interested in seeing where the world is going in our space. Okay, and starting from most of the CEO of countries and regions, they want to hear, and they ask us, even one-to-one meeting, can we discuss about this? So thinking about giving back this through different ways, one-to-one, reports, deck, webinar. It's something that we develop over time and that we do so that people know what we are doing and get the benefit too personally. So that's an important piece of our job that was not developed at the beginning, but now we are growing, because we think it's very important. Okay. And that makes also, that helps to create this sponsorship when we need it, because they are ready also after when we see a startup. It's okay, I want to work with them, with my team, or this is really interesting. Okay. And then there is the tangible piece, which is, okay, what does it bring concretely to the business? And then there are different stuff that it can bring to us. We invest mostly in B2C company, and business to consumer company for us are really interesting because it helps us to access directly into this moment where people socialize together. While our current business, we sell, our product to wholesaler, selling to a retailer, selling to consumer. So basically, we don't know who is buying our product. And with the startup we invest in, there is this opportunity to access directly to this moment of consumption. And working with a startup to, learn, and also creating new channel and direct channel for distribution of our product with, going from a push to pull. And I think this is the most interesting piece, and to experiment and test and learn, working with a startup, how we can help them to grow their business while helping our business to grow too. So that's new channel of distribution, direct to consumer. That's I would say the number one. And after, there is a lot of things we can co-create, with the startup, where we bring our expertise, they bring their expertise, and we can co-create almost new product and services together. And that's what we are trying to do also. So that for us, it's part of our diversification. It's not only about selling alcohol, it can be also creating new type of experience with people who know how to do it, where we bring some knowledge, we bring access to our consumer, and they bring all their expertise and structure to do it. So this co-creation piece with startup is also very important. And also we get a lot of information and data, while of course keeping, all the privacy stuff, but, it's a lot of information that, is really useful to our business. So there are many things that can, be useful for us, a long range, and we try to measure that and follow it, so that we can talk also about it.
Yeah, it becomes a number of success stories you can communicate.
Exactly. That's exactly this.
And in your case, it came from the CEO saying, I want a corporate VC. So you clearly have the strategic fit, at least from the very top. How do you build your story with success stories along the way to reinforce the message from the strategy of the company?
You mean externally?
Externally, yes. So clearly you have a corporate strategy at the mothership, Pernod Ricard. How do you, maybe with the right investments, you're actually augmenting that strategy or giving examples of that strategy?
Yeah, we take our case study and we talk about it, because we have some good case study where we managed to create this win-win partnership, and then we talk about it externally without any issue, and this is a good way to show what we can bring, and that even between a startup and a corporation, this magic can happen. And we don't lie about it. We say, it's hard. It took us 1 year or two to do it. It's not like, the day after an investment, we managed to do it. Because there is always, it takes always time, to create it. And you need to find this magic moment where it's the right time for the startup, the right time for the corporate,
yep,
to work together. And usually this is in the growth phase too. It can't be an early stage of the startup. So it's in early stage, the startup has to figure out, okay, how do I survive, product market fit. So we bring some expertise and help, but the real case study happens usually in growth phase.
I think you're touching on something super important, which is the timing of what you can bring to the startup. It doesn't mean it has to be the week after you invest. It could be a year, 2 years, 3 years, but you have a roadmap and you have a list of items you can help with.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think when we discuss with the startup before the investment and align what can we do together, so there is a set of possibilities, okay, and then we don't put any timing on it. They say, okay, this is our common vision on why you will take our money, and then we always say, okay, it will happen when it will happen. We will do our best so that it happens, but and we try to define an order of things. And we say it will be up to you and up to us, or our corporation, so that it happens at the right moment. And I don't think it's good neither to push partnership or collaboration in early stage phase. That's not good for the startup.
Yep.
Unless there is an obvious win, like we are a customer, and then they can talk about it and recruit many other customers.
But then it's not a push. They want it.
Oh, they want it. But the problem is that to become a customer in early stage, usually they are too small, So in early stage, it's more about the vision and the brand recognition and bringing some expertise. And then when they are in growth phase, they raise a new round of money to accelerate the growth and roll out their playbook. This is where we can help them actually, and where also our colleague from the corporate will be ready. We'll see the value, because the startup is expanding, to spend time with them.
So one thing that you have, which you didn't have when you started, is now you start to have proof points you can add value to the startups. How much of these proof points you use to convince new startups to take your money?
They don't ask so much about it. I don't think they need that, to be honest. Okay. Of course, we give some examples. But with the startup, the relationship is very important too. The connection with the founder. Is there a common fit? Are we aligned on the vision of what we can do together? I think that's the most important. And after, we are also cautious. We say, guys, it might not happen. We'll do our best to help you. And and here are some examples. But we don't see so much skepticism, from the startup, on that. I don't think they need this so much.
Very nice. Let's talk a little about KPIs. What do you think are the KPIs that you've defined that was the most helpful for your team to deliver according to your vision?
But and then I think the most important KPI is not the strategic one, is the financial one.
Okay, say more. This is good.
No, but because we are CVC, so and if you are a strategic CVCs, to create strategic value, and you can we have a long list of KPI. What is the most important one? I need to think about it, because I don't have on the strategic piece, the one that makes the whole difference. Or there is maybe one is, with how many startups have you done a partnership? Yes, probably that's the most important one.
That's a meaningful one.
That's a meaningful one. But it depends what type of partnership too. So if but that would be the most important one. But on the strategic piece, the most important one is your portfolio doing well? Are you going to give return to your mothership? And because if we don't do good investments, one day we will have an issue. Because they will say you can explain all your long list of strategic KPIs. People will say, yeah, it's great, but it's not good enough for me. While if you have first a good return on investment, good IRR or multiple, on your fund, then it's your insurance, I would say, to last as a CVC and make sure that people recognize the value. At the end, it's about making money. So how do you make money? As investor, we make money with the return we give back. So we don't compromise on this. We don't compromise. When we look at a startup, even if we are super excited strategically, if we don't believe we can get a good outcome financially from our investment, we don't invest.
It doesn't mean you don't introduce it to the mothership.
We do,
yeah.
Of course. We never close doors, of course, because what we think today might be wrong tomorrow. So we create the connection if we think it makes really sense. And it's a good way also to learn about the startup and working together. and we keep the door open for the next round. But if we're not convinced, then we prefer to wait.
And as a finance guy, I think what you've described is the difference between being perceived as a cost line or a profit line. And the discussion is very different.
It's very different. And but it's a good point, because so many times people say, how much money have you spent? I say,
yes.
It is not spent. You spend money in marketing and all this stuff. How do you measure your return on marketing investment? No, it's not spent. It's an investment. And oh yeah, it's true. And then okay, you expect a return on investment. So we are primary investor. We are primary venture capitalist, but we are corporate venture capitalists. So, which makes our job very hard, to be honest, because we want everything. We want the return, the financial return, and we want the strategic benefit.
But let me challenge you. Is that not correlated? Let's say the top 3 financial returns of your 25 portfolio companies are the ones that are going to outperform everyone else. Are they not the ones that also bring the most strategic value to your company?
Yes, it's completely true.
So at the end, it's about picking the winners.
It's about picking the winners. But I do have an example of winner in our portfolio where we have not managed to create some strategic value yet, even if it's obvious what we can do.
But is it a question of time, or is it a question of relationship, or?
It's a question of time. It's a question of internal setup. Also, depends by region. On the sponsors, or depends on on priorities and so on. So it's a question of time. That's what we think. But you are right. If you don't invest in the right company, there will be no strategic partnership. So you need to find a winner anyway.
Yeah, I think no one will have a problem to say that if you invest in the losers, you're losing. That's for sure. So let me talk about portfolio building and the strategy behind building a portfolio. So now you have 25 companies in your portfolio. How did you build it so that you touch on many parts that are important for Pernod Ricard?
We try to we map spaces that we're interested in before investing. So we have a roadmap. We work with many colleagues also internally, looking at the cultural foresight team, and so we try to develop point of view on where the world is going in our space, and the space that are the most interesting for us. And then we do deep dives. And then we drill down into some spaces, analyze all the company, and then reach out to them. So this is the main way. But of course, we have naturally a deal flow that comes from our network, even from spaces that we were not thinking so much about. So it's inbound and outbound, and this is how the deal flow works. But there is this constant work of identifying spaces, working with even our colleagues, and say, what are your key strategic challenge? What are the spaces that would be the most relevant for you? So and then we build our thesis like this, where we say, okay, these are the spaces we're interested in, and doing this deep dive. And I know you do that too. It's very valuable for us as investor, but after we share it also internally. After with our colleagues, to bring some, intangible value to them.
It's very powerful because you can even close the loop. You can show how you took their inputs to build your investment thesis and invested in the companies, and now going back to say, do you want to engage with them? When you close the loop like this, it creates all the goodwill you need.
Exactly.
Very nice. So what's next for your portfolio? I'm not going to say your strategy for investment, but how do you see Convivialité Ventures in 5 years? Very high vision.
I mean, I think the main challenge of a CVC is to still exist in 5 years.
Yeah.
So the cemetery of a CVC is pretty important. So because crisis, change of management, and so on. So I think one, we still want to be there, and having more impact for Pernod Ricard, which means investing more and more geography. and with a broader thesis. So we started with B2C. We have started to invest in B2B business. So basically, we want to be here to help to solve the most important strategic challenge we can have, where we can't find internally the resource or the time, or we can't create it. So we partner with great startups who know how to do it. So we want to be the go-to for this. We don't know how to do it, then we need a partner. Okay, then we can help. We want to be the go-to for finding the partner in the most innovative spaces where we can create this partnership and in the same time make an investment.
Very nice. Thank you for the candid and transparent answer. That was really nice. Let's move to something very practical. You're a very small team. How did you build your investment committee? Is it a team that's outside, or is it mixed with you? Or
when you say outside of the group or outside of the...
No, inside Pernod Ricard. How did you build your investment committee so that you can be responsive for investment decisions?
So our investment committee, we have the top executive of the group, which is maybe not so usual, I don't know, but with our CEO, and he's the one who asked me to do it, and he's still very interested in knowing what's going on. So we have regular meetings. It's in the calendar with them, and when we need to meet with them more, then we create some ad hoc meeting, and they find the time for that, which is great. It's short, you don't have a lot of time to set a topic, but they know we need to move fast, and they are super fast to answer. And even sometimes with an email, it's in 24 hours they respond. So
that's very impressive. And I think you're right. It's part of the design. You have to make sure you can make decisions fast when you need to move fast.
Exactly.
I want to finish on what we said at the very beginning, which is identifying how big an investment, a startup can be. How do you get a feel for that, how big it can be? Because you can always say, oh, it will be IPO and $100 billion, but that's not true. So how do you assess and validate and challenge on the how big it can be?
The first is the gut. I'm sorry to say it, but that's what it is. And after you need to rationalize it. So, and understanding how big is this problem, and is it a massive global problem? How big is the market? If the market doesn't exist, how big can this new market can be? So it starts from there. And I think it's from the conversation with the CEO, listening to his vision, that you get a sense of this too, because it's a combination of how big is the market, what is the product that you want to build, and can this team do it? And this is how you get the sense that this is the winning team that sits on something that can be really big. So that, that we spend some time to think how big it can be, but we spend also some time, and that's more maybe my CFO part, on how small it can be. Okay, it can of course fail, but it's also an arbitration between how big it can be and how wrong, or what is the worst case, especially for a startup that, is in a growth phase where, you see a trajectory. And so we always dream about how big it can be, but we think more, okay, what do we think it will be,
Yep.
And what is the low case? So that this is how we build our comfort that it's worth to play and even put more money, because it's relatively not safe, I would say, because it's always risky, but it's a good bet. And if it works, then it can be magnificent, so.
I think when you mentioned the gut, I have a feeling that it's also the gut on your confidence for the entrepreneur to make it successful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly this.
Great. It's a really good way to end on the entrepreneurs and your gut for them to succeed. So thank you, Stephane. Merci beaucoup.
You're welcome, Nicolas. It's always a pleasure to engage with you and share our best practice.
Thank you.